I knew that my family was a little bit different than others. When they migrated, I was the only child. All of a sudden, there's 3 other kids. And so now there's 6 of us in a one-bedroom apartment. I started seeing a lot of my friends going through this transition. We went from like playing outside to get into like gangs. Again, you don't know any other way. Do I go to law school? Like, what is going on? The next day, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I just quit my job of 11 years and decided to go to law school.
Today's guest is the definition of resilience, creativity, and the American dream. Many of you may know Gabe Estrada as a world-renowned Star Wars collector and creator, but his journey is about so much more than fandom. After immigrating from Mexico, Gabe built a life rooted in passion and perseverance, becoming a father, a husband, a business owner, and an attorney. In this conversation, we talk about humble beginnings, never-ending hustle, fatherhood, and the power of chasing your dreams despite all the odds stacked against you. This is Gabe Estrada's story. Thanks, Gabe. I just feel so lucky that I get to know you on a personal level. I think a lot of people probably know you for the Star Wars of it all. Now it's Gabe's Empire. It used to be Star Wars Replicas. And you're this insane creator in the Star Wars community, but you've been a San Diego local. You're an attorney here. But when I think about someone who is like a living success and getting to do and follow their dreams, like I think of you, man. And so it's just an honor to have you.
Thank you, man. No, I really appreciate that. And I feel lucky to know you. So, I mean, it is mutually, the feeling is mutual.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, man, I've definitely felt like I've lived a lot of lives.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the best way to explain it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've done so many things, different career paths, throughout my life, and one leads to the next. Yeah. And of course, there's going to be, adversity and hardship kind of throughout the whole thing. But right. I embrace it. And I think that's my main thing,
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I look at your content, everything, it's so positive, it's so upbeat, it's about, escapism, and it's about just things that make us happy. I'm a giant movie fan, I'm a giant Star Wars fan. So it's like, you're this place to go where you're always going to get something fun and light out of it. But I will say, it's like, I know that path to get there and where you are now probably wasn't easy, right? So can you take us back to kind of where your story starts and how you get to where you're at?
Yeah. So I think the Star Wars thing and the Star Wars collection room kind of almost bookshelves my story. That collection room that leads to that content is kind of my American dream. And that really is what I see it as, because as a kid, I would never imagine being able to have such a space of something that I was truly passionate about. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Mexico, and my family migrated to the United States when I was young.
Do you remember how old?
About 8 years old. So
okay.
I was really little when my family came to the United States, and it was very strange to me, right? I didn't speak English, and in fact, my only introduction really to American culture was Star Wars.
Wow.
In Mexico, I would ask my parents to rent the movies, and there's 2 versions of the movie. You could either get it in dubbed in Spanish, right? Or you can get it in English with subtitles. And even as a kid, I remember, being 5 years old, 6 years old, and specifically asking them for the subtitled ones because I wanted to know what the characters sound like, and I would memorize the lines. Even though I didn't know what they meant, I would memorize the lines because I would recreate those scenes playing with my toys, with my action figures. So that was Star Wars was my introduction to American culture, and it was kind of my gateway into that. So, when we came to the United States and, my family migrated, it was definitely kind of my attachment, right, to American culture, which is kind of cool because, Star Wars is one of those universal movies, right? Or a lot of people
Yeah.
just love.
I know. I think it just speaks to you. It's, the adventure, the opportunity to go on,
Yeah.
this journey and the hero's journey, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Luke is that ultimate character. And
Yeah.
I can see maybe why that would speak to you as a young kid,
Yeah.
and getting maybe in a sense whisked off to a faraway land or somebody
Yeah.
or something that you are just imagining, right? And I'm sure it was probably scary too to think, all right, we're leaving where we're comfortable, but then also maybe there is that excitement of like, what's the possibilities here?
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things about, kind of getting thrown into this whole new world really, was just adapting, right? So
Mhm.
early on, I being 8 years old, obviously had to learn the language, first of all. And I was the only one in my household that spoke English at one point.
Wow.
I picked it up really quick, as a kid.
Mhm.
And so I almost became almost part of the adults, in the family. Even though at 8 years old, I
Yeah.
was almost treated like an adult because I was the one who was translating for my parents. When we would go, shopping for something, I'm the one
Mhm.
who would go and ask the clerk, for whatever question is. I
Sure.
remember my parents buying their first car, and I was the one negotiating with the car salesman because
Wow.
I was the one, explaining to him, which worked. It was good and it was bad. I used it to my advantage because, of course, anytime I got in trouble at school or something,
Mhm.
my mom, there's a phone call, on the answering machine. My
Right.
mom's like, "What is that? What are they saying?" I was like, "Oh no, just that some kids were being bad and that she wanted to let you know that."
Oh,
And I would
yeah.
always
Yeah.
like kind of use it to my advantage
Right.
where I wouldn't tell my parents the
Yeah, like,
entire truth.
hey, Gabe skipped school for the last 3
Yeah,
days or whatever, and you
yeah,
answer the call and be like, "Oh, they said I've been doing great."
right.
No, no.
So early on, understanding the power of communication,
Mhm.
right? And almost kind of translating concepts into ways that people could understand. And I think
Mm.
that became I didn't know it at the time, but that became kind of part of my strengths, right? My traits that I figured out a way to absorb things and
Yeah.
then being able to teach it back to someone, in a different way, in a funner way, right?
Yeah.
And I'll kind of talk about how that connects later down the line. But yeah, so very typical immigrant kind of family.
Yeah. Well, I want to
Yeah,
say though, I mean, I think, yeah, but it's still a burden. Like it's amazing you took it on and you probably didn't realize it, but that probably did add a little bit more stress on you in the family environment. Like you said, it made you
no,
kind of force you in these adult
yeah,
conversations early. Tell me a little bit about like at this time, like engaging with other people in the world,
mhm,
like being at school.
yeah.
Like, was that hard? Was that an added element that was tough, or were you like, it wasn't too bad?
It was. I mean, it definitely adds, a different layer because you're as a kid, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. I'm very aware of financial situations at home, right?
Mm.
And as most immigrant families, so most of the times there's one income coming in, or it's maybe sometimes double income.
Yeah.
But as the family starts growing, I definitely was exposed to, a lot of the financial troubles that my parents were going through. So my dad, it was a single income. We lived in this, 1 bedroom apartment. All of a sudden, there's 3 other siblings that my parents had.
Yeah.
When they migrated, I was the only child. All of a sudden, there's 3 other kids in
Wow.
a 1 bedroom apartment. So now there's 5 of us, 6 of us in a 1 bedroom apartment, and I knew that my family was a little bit different than others because I didn't have my own room. My room
Mhm.
was the living room. In
Yeah.
fact, that was where I slept. And my mom was super cool early on because she would let me decorate however I wanted. And I was big into Star Wars, comic
Mhm.
books, Spider-Man, and
Mhm.
she'd let me put up my posters and set up my figures up in the living room.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that was a big, big, again, part of now looking back on it, again, tying it back to my Star Wars collection and stuff like that, about like
Yeah.
displaying it and that perception of what people would think, right? When they came over and
Mhm.
seen these little toys, like, why are these little toys there?
Right.
Well, without letting them know that, hey, there's, you know, 5 people in one bedroom and then me in the living room, right? Not
Right.
knowing that that was my bedroom.
Right,
So
right.
I grew up, like I said, in a situation where, I kind of was pushed aside, not necessarily pushed aside, but it was that because there was other siblings, younger siblings,
Mm-hmm.
I no longer became kind of a priority as far as like, hey, buy him his like the toys that I wanted, the
Mm-hmm.
collectibles that I wanted, that I was really passionate about.
Yeah.
So early on at that time, I figured out, and this is huge, that that leads into kind of what makes me and my drive is I had to figure out how to fend for myself. Meaning,
Yeah.
if I wanted something, I knew I couldn't just go and ask my parents because I was well aware that they weren't there financially
Right.
to be able to buy a GI Joe for me or like a toy for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to figure out a way to do it.
What do you start telling yourself? At what age do you actually start realizing this? Because I mean, that's a lot to take in, I mean, financial troubles, I think, are scary for anybody. And maybe you don't have as much as everybody else. You also kind of start collecting. I'm guessing you treasure these things a lot more now too, right?
Yeah.
Like every toy you get, every comic book,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
are you trying to save up to get it? How do you start even getting these things
Yeah.
to put up on the wall?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where my entrepreneur kind of side came out, because I was about 10 years old and I discovered there was this little shop down the street from my parents' house. And it was like a little antique toy store called Time Tunnel. I would go there, again, this is, early 90s, late 80s, so kids were still kind of running the streets and running around on their bikes and everywhere. So I would take my bike or I would walk over to this little store and I would just go and talk to the owner. And the owner was just there. He was just some young, guy who
Yeah, it's probably like us now,
Yeah.
Dad, kids, yeah, dude, this is sick. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I would just go there and just learn from him, right? And I would bug him and I'd be like, oh, like, how much is this one? How much is that one? And how much is this one? And even then, like, I mean, some of those vintage figures were starting to cost like $100, let's say. Like now they're a couple thousand, but back then it was like $100. But to me, $100 was like unattainable. There's no way I can get that toy ever.
Absolutely.
So early on, like I said, I learned from him that there's value in these collectibles because I saw that he would buy stuff from other collectors. He would sell stuff to other collectors.
Yeah.
So around 10 years old, I figured out that, hey, if I go to the thrift stores and I look through the little baggies of like, just like mixed toys that people donate, I could find vintage toys that he wants to sell. And I could buy them and sell them to him or trade up to get something that I wanted. So around 10 years old, I would do my best to find $1 because there were 99-cent little baggies that they sold at the thrift store.
Yeah.
Whether it was like asking my parents for like a quarter here and there or keeping the change. Like my parents would send me to the store to buy stuff and I'd come back and, I'd keep a couple quarters or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
And I would save up $1. I would go to the thrift store and I would look through all the little baggies of like mixed toys until I would find one like a Pez or something that store would want.
Right.
And I would go back and sell it to them or trade them up. So that's how I started collecting some of these things that I couldn't get myself. Yeah. And that was 10 years old.
Man, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess where I'm thinking is like, this was a very tough situation, but you found this opportunity. Were your parents these people that were like, you can always do something, like even if you don't, have all the opportunities, like it's going to be up to you. Like, what was the encouragement from your parents, I guess?
My mom was very, very encouraging as far as like education. My mom was all about education. She was a dentist in Mexico, and she kind of left that behind when we came to the United States. And so she was all about encouraging me to get an education. My dad, he was more of like, get to work, do your job. Yeah, hardworking.
Just show up every day, do the best you can.
Yeah. But again, even at 10 years old, I was starting to realize that, there's certain paths, in American culture, and there you could be a business owner, and sure, you can go to school and do something else, or you can work, just like my dad was working, just like manual labor. And I think my parents were instrumental. For one, my mom encouraging me to kind of do, yeah, whatever I wanted to do.
Mm,
But my dad almost learning kind of like from his lack of knowledge of the American system, the credit system,
right.
the way, early on, my parents would, get in debt with something, right? Or a car or something. And again, I was 10 years old realizing that, oh, wait, my dad can't afford to pay the car bill this month
Mm,
for some reason or another. And knowing that, hey, that car's going to get repoed now.
mhm.
And understanding the responsibility that came, with making sure that the bills are paid, that, that
Yeah.
you were up to date with everything. So it was kind of like a merger of both my parents. My mom encouraged me to really follow my dreams, and understanding that, you had to also be responsible with
Right.
that money.
Like there's consequences to
Yeah.
your actions and how you live.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's what a crazy lesson to learn at such a young age,
Yeah.
though, and it's, you see where you are now and you're like, oh, of course it ends up this way. But also, I think it shouldn't be understated the burden it put on you and
Yeah.
how you had to like shoulder this weight, because that's a
Yeah.
huge amount of responsibility so young. What do you start telling yourself? Can you consciously remember, how am I going to move through this life? Because you didn't just take the path of education, right? Like
No.
you eventually go into a band,
Oh.
you start doing all these other businesses. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, take us to this next step, because
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think it's amazing that you are able to shoulder this much weight at such a young age and then just keep going and still like, you never lost the childlike wonder too. When I look
Yeah.
at you now, how do you manage these things
Yeah.
now from like 10 to about 18?
Yeah. Well, I think that's what happened, right? I kind of almost felt like I had to put my childhood on pause in order to kind of really kind of give back to my family, right? Like being there, right? Especially my siblings were little, so I became, like I said, like a third adult in the house. Even at 10, 11 years old, I really was taking care of my siblings. Just again, almost becoming an entrepreneur just to get some of my action
I
figures.
know.
But
Which that was incredible, man. Like props to you. You
Right?
hear these stories of like, crazy billionaires and all this stuff, and like they start in these super humble beginnings. I'm like,
Yeah.
dang, Gabe had that at 10.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
like-
absolutely. But you got to remember too, like where we lived, it was a rough area too.
What part of San Diego was it?
It was
in?
actually, no, it was in San Jose. So
Oh, it was in San
it was
Jose?
Bay Area. Yeah.
Oh, no way. Okay.
So we lived in a very rough area. So around that time, again, 11, 12, I started seeing a lot of my friends, kind of going through this transition where we went from like playing outside and, having fun or whatever, to them starting to get into like gangs, like local gangs. Again, you don't know any other way, when you're
Right.
in that. And once you're at an age, right, where you start getting to middle school age,
Mhm.
you start realizing that, hey, wait a second, all my friends are doing this. They're all dressing a certain way.
Yeah.
Hey, I maybe I should do the same thing.
Mhm.
So around that time, because of the friendships and all that stuff, I was gravitating towards that situation as well, and
Wow.
that really drove a wedge between me and my family, because I think my parents saw it. My parents saw me transitioning
Yeah.
from just kind of this like
happy
happy kid, that cared about like comics and toys, to all of a sudden caring about like lowrider cars and like Ben Davis pants and ironing my clothes. And I'm here, 12 years old, making sure that my creases are like perfectly
Mhm.
creased, the little baby cuffs,
Okay. Right.
creasing my shirts down. I was like slicking back my hair, the 3 flowers, the Cortezes. I remember one day, even just school shopping for the new year, they would only buy me clothes one time a year, right before the school year. And I
Yeah.
remember, we would always go to Mervyn's, right? Because Mervyn, you could get a lot for your money at Mervyn's.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
remember one of those years asking my parents for this like Ben Davis shirt and Cortezes, Nike
Mhm.
Cortezes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a big part of the budget already for my school clothes. So my
Mm.
dad was like, "You're gonna spend like half of that," and I think it was
Mm.
like, honestly, they would give me like $100 or something like that to buy all my school clothes, and
Wow.
that was like
Right.
most of it right there.
I know that's like a pair of shoes these days, right?
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, geez, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember buying that. I bought some Nike Cortezes and like a Ben Davis shirt, and I just remember going at it with my parents. Well, my dad mostly. He was like, "Oh, like you're a cholo, you're a gangster, and this and that." And it was one day we were outside my house with some of my friends, and this other car full of like gang members pulled up on us,
Yeah.
and that was kind of the wake up call for me because they got out, and of course, my friends start,
Yeah. Now
kind of
everyone's like chirping
going
at
back,
each
yeah,
other.
chirping
and-
at each other. So what happens is they start beating us up. My friends run, but we're in front of
No.
my house. I get beat up because of my friends, and I think that was one of those lessons in those situations that I was like, wait a second, like my friends, they just ditched me,
Yeah, quote unquote friends,
right?
right? Yeah.
So around that time is when I kind of realized, oh, wait a second, like this is not what I should be doing, and I
Mhm.
started getting into skating and, and that culture around that
Yeah.
time, and music. I discovered kind of music was a big,
Right, man.
eye-opening moment.
I know. I think that's something we bond over too.
Yeah.
I definitely love like hardcore music
Yeah.
and like pop punk era and everything. But okay, the friends run off,
Yeah.
you get in this fight, it's outside. Are your parents home at this moment?
They are home.
There?
Yeah. My mom, yeah,
Does she see this happen?
she didn't see it. I just, when I came in, and I didn't want to
Yeah.
tell them because
Of course.
they
Yeah.
were gonna be like, I told you, I told you,
Right.
stop hanging out with those kids,
Yeah.
So, I just came in all busted up. But
Yeah.
again, yeah.
At this point though, do you like obviously you're like, man,
Mhm.
these guys aren't really my friends.
Yeah.
Are you now trying to find different friends or because like it's such an easy thing to say, like, just leave your friends behind, but it's just so hard to do, even if you outgrow them, right? Even if your interests change and you go on a different path, it's very hard to leave people who you think like you get along with, they got your back. How do you, besides knowing that you shouldn't hang out with them, start changing your
Yeah.
life into like, I'm gonna skate, I'm gonna play music, all that?
Yeah. I mean, there was always, just like any like middle school, right? There's always different groups and like different crews.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the school was a K-8 school. So it was the same kids that like we grew up together,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
it was easy to transition between, different groups and different friends.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also speaks to you though,
Mm.
like just how personal you are
Yeah.
though, because I think one of the biggest things for my life was I went from a Christian private school from like
Mhm.
elementary school. And then sixth grade, I got moved to like public middle school.
Yeah.
And that was a shock, man.
Yeah.
That was really hard for me. I took it really hard. I was like, I didn't have any friends anymore. I knew maybe like two kids that I was on a travel soccer team with
Yeah.
when I was younger. And I was like, all of a sudden I went from being the super good kid,
Mhm.
hair parted down the middle, like
Yeah.
uniform, everything, to like, I don't care about school at all.
Yeah.
I just want friends. I don't want to be like lonely. I want to be out. So that was a tough thing. I think that really was kind of foundational for me growing up.
Yeah. And again, I think it's one of those things to like that I learned to adapt right around that time. And that's followed me my whole life, right? Is the adaptation to change and adaptation to again different groups, different friends. And so yeah, so around that time, that's around when we moved to San Diego. So it was kind of
Oh,
it separated me from that situation. And we
wow.
came to San Diego. And again, it was different because I had to start over. I had no friends.
It almost was like a curse and a blessing, probably
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But even then, I really wasn't focusing on school. I was kind of the same way. I was just all about finding friends and now girls and like just being out there. And I almost started becoming this statistic, right? Where they talk
Mm,
about like, oh, like Hispanic community, like, they'll go into gangs or the prison system, or like maybe just not get some girl pregnant early and
right, right.
and
It is
kind of
sad. I feel like rhetoric and story that we hear in the news,
yeah,
but also maybe embellished
yeah.
sometimes. Yeah, and so you're living this life. Where do you go from
So
there?
yeah, so I'm here in San Diego, like I didn't care about school at all. failing all my classes. I would just ditch. And it was just, I didn't care about school.
Yeah.
In fact, when I graduated high school, I think out of like 420, what's funny enough, I actually frame my high school transcript and I keep it with all my like law school diplomas and stuff, because it does remind me that like, hey, look, this is what you can do when you put your mind to it. But out of 424 students, I was 421. There's only 3 worse students under me in my class in high school. But somehow, you know what? I managed to graduate because I was good at talking to the teachers and convincing them to like, hey, let me do this one project to like get that D or get, just like a little bit just to pass. So I was very personal with the teachers. And
and it probably speaks to the maturity you had to have when you were younger.
Yeah.
Like now you're like, okay, I know how to talk to adults. I'm like, all right, come on, Mrs. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, give me one more chance. I do it. I promise.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you probably did a decent job at those too.
Yeah.
It sounds like whatever you put your mind to, you actually were able to get it done. But you're right. It was like a low bar just to pass.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was all I cared about. I wanted to pass enough to get my mom off my back, because again, my mom was really about education. Make sure you get your education.
Yeah.
And it was just that bar, just enough to keep them off, off my shoulders. Right.
Yeah.
So I graduate high school, and I immediately, I'm already working full time, right? Since then I'm working at a movie theater full time.
Okay, back to the pop culture interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And what got me interested in there is because one day I went to the movies. I think I went to go watch, I think maybe it was like American Pie or something around that time, and I saw the Star Wars Episode 1 poster with Anakin with the shadow. Of
one
Darth
of the
Vader.
best movie posters of all time.
Yeah, and I was like, I need that poster. I want that poster. Whatever I have to do, I need that poster. So I go and talk to the employees, and I'm like, hey, like, do you guys sell those posters afterwards? Like, what do you do with them? It's like, no, they usually give them to employees. And I was like, I need to be an employee. How do I apply? And and I applied, and I got a job literally just so I can try to get that poster.
Wow.
And I did. I got that poster. But yeah,
it's amazing.
So that was my first kind of real job. I was working at this movie theater. And once I graduated, I started just working full time. I became a manager real quick, and that was kind of my full-time profession. I literally thought, I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do forever. I'm gonna be a movie theater manager. This is awesome. Like, I was really, I was good at what I was doing. And so I was there from, probably when I was like 17, 18 through like around 20. And around that time, I met I was dating around and all that stuff, and I met a girl there at the movie theater that I actually went to high school with. We started talking, and we started dating, and she got pregnant.
Oh wow!
And we're young. I was probably 20 when she got pregnant. She was probably 19. So we had my oldest daughter. We had her when I was about 21.
Man,
so
what's going on in your head at this moment, right? That's huge news. Like, life seems like it's going in a pretty good way for you now. You're like, all right, I'm making some money. I like this. I'm pretty good at this. And you're still so young at this moment. Is there any future aspirations beyond, like, I'm going to manage a movie theater? No. Okay. I mean, so when this news gets to you, what do you start thinking? What are you feeling at this moment?
And again, look, at that point, as career-wise, let me back up. Around when I was graduating high school, I started a band. I started playing in a band.
Okay.
So that was something in my head that I was like, yeah, like, this is what I'm going to do. But I'm going to become a rock star. Like, I'm going to be a rock star, and I'm writing all these songs, and I'm, doing, just playing music. But yeah, so then that kind of changed everything, because as soon as my oldest daughter was born, I kind of had to just drop all that. And I was like, I can't be a musician anymore. Like, I can't do that. I have to focus on working to provide for my family. And as soon as, and I was working at the movie theater, then I ended up getting a job at the airport, just because it was a little bit higher paying job.
Okay.
I would go in at 3 a.m, get off at like 11 in the morning. It was brutal. It was just such a
Wow.
brutal thing. But it was what my dad did for decades. And it was kind of like almost going into like the family business.
Mhm.
And I just couldn't do it. It was just
Yeah.
such a tough thing. But I had to because of my family, right? Of my daughter now.
Do you feel at this moment like you know you're doing what your dad does? Do you feel like God, I failed? Or are you thinking like, no, I mean, I guess this is the best choice? Like, I guess just how do you
Yeah.
feel about it now that you have to do this job that you saw your dad do?
Yeah. I saw myself getting into that same cycle, right? I saw myself now I've become my dad now. And it's like I'm working this job that maybe I don't like,
Mhm.
but I need to because I need to provide for my growing family,
Yeah.
right?
Are you disappointed in yourself at this moment though? Are you like, because I mean, uh, this trophy right here, I
Yeah.
got it for working, you know, in the same company my dad did, and we
Yeah.
eventually got in the same team. And for years, I was like, I want to prove that his way isn't the only way to do this. Like I want to prove that, you know, I'm smart and like I can do things my own way and still be successful. And then when I got this trophy, I like won salesman of the year in a category for my team. And I was like, oh, that's it. I proved myself. Like
Yeah.
I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it really was that fast. Like I grinded out. And when you get this job, there's people who my dad's been at this job for almost 40 years
Yeah.
doing this thing. And it's incredible and it's amazing what he's built and everything.
Mhm.
But once I got this and I hit that 2 year mark, I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't have
Yeah.
anything to prove anymore. I already showed my way works. I need to do something that's right for my life.
Yeah.
So do you have this sense of feeling too, or what are you feeling about doing this job that your dad has been doing?
Yeah. I mean, it was almost a sense of like acceptance from my dad because again, I was always at odds with my dad. Like no
Mhm.
matter what, it was like he didn't like the way I dressed. He didn't like around in high school. I was into the punk scene, so I was dressing like a punk. Like I would dye my hair crazy colors and like
Yeah, yeah,
just it
yeah.
was. And he just did not like that. And
Mhm.
even when I was at the movie theater, he'd be like, "Oh, like that's just like your little job or
Like a
whatever."
hobby.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like when I started working in the same company, it was the first time that I felt that my dad was like, oh, like he's now becoming
Oh,
like a man. Like he's,
he respected
he's
you finally.
working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I wanted to talk to people. That was the thing. I'm always all about relationships. I love talking to people. And around so no, so my daughter wasn't born yet. She was pregnant. She wasn't born, and
Mhm.
they laid me off 3 weeks. So they laid me off right before Christmas.
Oh,
My daughter was
man.
born in January. So literally, I think it was like 5 weeks before my daughter was due,
Oh,
they laid me off.
sh
And to me, it was both a relief because I didn't like that job, but
mhm,
also just this added stress, and especially with like
100%.
the insurance, because I think that's what drove me to get into that. It was the insurance,
Mhm.
because at the movie theater we didn't get insurance,
Yeah.
and at this other job they would provide insurance for me and my family.
Which you're probably looking at, like, the medical bills for the pregnancy, and you're like,
Yeah,
"Holy crap, like,
yeah.
we need some insurance."
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then I get laid off, and all of a sudden it's like, what do I do? So we had to like apply for like Cobra and like,
Mhm.
just the gap benefits.
Yeah.
And luckily, we got that because yeah, like I didn't work from there, trying to find a job till my daughter was born.
Yeah.
And around that time, I found a job at Best Buy.
Okay.
And that was my second career almost. I honestly third because when I was 10 years old, me
Yeah.
hustling those toys, I was doing that for a
Yeah, you
good
can
while.
I would count that as a career too.
Right?
You were wheeling, dealing, and, like, finding product, you were just selling it, so yes, I think that
Yeah.
was definitely part of the career.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that, then the movie theater. And then obviously, then I got into Best Buy, and I quickly realized that I was good. Like I was good at sales, and I was really,
Mm.
you know, I was ranking, one of the top salesmen in my store. And again, I quickly moved up, right? I became like, the senior and then supervisor, and I quickly became a manager. And it was refreshing because it was fun. It was a younger environment.
Yeah.
You know, you're surrounded by like movies and music and technology and all this stuff that I was really passionate about. And around that time, again, I had kind of a change in my mindset that I was like, I also need to be happy, right? I don't want to work in somewhere where I don't want to be, where I'm not happy. And around that time, I started kind of getting back into music again. I wanted to play music again.
Had you taken a bunch of time off from music at this point?
Yeah, maybe a couple years, just
Couple
because,
years? Wow.
yeah, with my daughter and stuff. I mean, I would always play like at home, with
Mhm.
my acoustic guitar. But yeah, around that time, I went back into playing music, and that's when I was really taking it more serious, right? As far as like, all right, Best Buy's paying my bills. I'm making good money there, but I want to be a rock star. I want to be a musician.
Okay.
So around that time,
Yeah.
I invested. I remember getting a Guitar Center credit card and maxing it out because I needed the equipment and all that stuff. And
Okay.
and I was like, I'm doing
the
this.
dream is there. Yeah.
I'm
You're like still invested in this dream heavily.
100%. I'm doing this.
Okay.
And I did. I started, going out, and we started playing shows all around, San Diego. And yeah, that was around 2002. There, we met a lot of like local bands that were around because we're all playing shows together.
Mhm.
And, that was kind of like a wake up call for me, or maybe that wasn't a wake up call. I think it was like a transition in my life
Yeah.
where I realized that, I had this responsibility to, my my wife and kids. I was married. And,
You got
my
married
kid-
married around
we
this
had
time
to,
too?
yeah, because she needed insurance, so we
Mm.
had to kind of merge the
Yeah.
um
The family
the
together.
family
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
to get that insurance.
Wow.
But around that time, I was trying to live that life, the rock star life, getting, even though it's just like, local shows. Yeah, I decided to, kind of leave the family life. And
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
and I got divorced and, separated. Of course not, with my daughter. She meant the world to me, and I wanted to make sure that she was taken care of at
Mhm.
all points. But yeah, so it separated at that point, which
Wow.
was rough. I think that was a hard part, not necessarily because of the relationship, but because of my daughter, right?
Yeah.
Just seeing her, and she was little, but knowing that she wasn't going to grow up kind of with the, two parent
Mhm.
dynamic. And even because I grew up with that, I
Yeah.
grew up with my two parents always being there.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
was hard for me to,
Yeah.
to accept.
I think that'd be hard for anybody, but it's so tough because I can also see it from your perspective. Like, yes, like there's the responsibility of being a parent, but it's also like you didn't necessarily have the childhood
Yeah.
that, other kids might have. You were always kind of working, you were always doing something to try to survive. And you finally maybe get this spark of an opportunity where you're like, I've always wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah.
It seems like it's going that way. It's like, you must have felt like you're getting torn into two different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was times where like, it was tough. And I would take my daughter, and again, she was little. I would put on, the noise canceling, headphones, and she would be sitting there in our band
Yeah,
practices.
just be screaming in a mic.
Yeah,
I'll look over at you. And,
yeah, but
yeah.
at the same time, as I was getting really serious about the band, I was also, again, really moving up in the corporate side of Best Buy. And
Okay.
again, I became a manager, and then I was on this council that Best Buy decided to open up like little guitar centers
Oh, okay.
inside their stores. And I was on that council, so I'd have to go to Minnesota all the time, talk to the like Fender and, all these,
Oh.
all these music.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's like both your things are kind of combining in a way.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, I play these instruments. Now I get to talk to the actual vendor of it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my. So yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think from
So
here?
so at that point, I'm like, look, it's either gonna go two ways. Like, either I'm gonna become a general manager and then go into corporate and just like be there and make good money on there, or I'm gonna become a rock star. It's gonna be one, like it's
Yeah.
Either or, right? And
Yeah.
that was it. Those were my two options.
Are you still in this moment though? Like, I'm just going to try to do both and see what takes off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
You weren't like, I'm just going to leave one and just focus on this. You're just
Yeah.
like, I'm going to keep doing both as best as I can.
Yep.
And then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yep.
Okay.
100%.
Gotcha.
And you know, I was living in a house at that point full of Navy guys, and I just happened to rent a room there. So like we would just throw these parties, and my band would play there, and it was again, it was a fun time, and again, I think it was age appropriate, right? Because at that point I was 23, you know, so it was like the first time in my life where I got to like really just like let loose and just have fun, and you know, kind of almost like be selfish, right? And just be like, I want to do this because it makes me happy.
Right.
But at the same time, Monday morning, I was right back at work, you know, doing my thing. But I enjoyed it. That's the one thing. I enjoyed working at Best Buy. And as I became a manager, I enjoyed teaching other people how to sell and the communication skills that would take. And it's funny because I would always, when I would do these big presentations and I would be teaching like the new employees, I'd always be like, look, there's two people in this world that the general public doesn't trust. One is salespeople. Two are attorneys. I'm going to show you like how to build the relationship so you're not a salesman. But it's funny that I would always bring up the attorneys. I would never in my wildest dreams think that I would become an attorney at that point.
I was like, and then you became the one thing.
Never. And here's where my life changed. And this is truly kind of like, you know, there's always like, there's these pivotal moments, right? And if you look back in your life, that
that fork in the road.
Yeah, kind of like, you know, the Marvel universe, right? Like where, you know,
where's the timeline going to go?
The timeline splits, right?
Yeah.
You know, obviously coming to the United States was one of them for me. Getting beat up by those cholos was another one for me. Getting laid off, you know, from that job, it was another one. Well, the next one that really was, well, you know, obviously my daughter too, you know, being born. The next one was meeting my wife. And that was a huge—
Your now wife, right?
Wife. Yes. Yeah. My current wife, because that was a pivotal moment in the way I viewed education. And here's kind of where that led to. So I was working at Best Buy. I was the manager for, I want to say the cell phones and cameras and that middle section. Here comes this young girl that, you know, she got a job. She was a Lexmark rep, you know, Lexmark, the printers.
Oh, okay.
And she got a summer part-time job in between her college. She was going to UC Santa Barbara. You know, during that summer of her first year, her freshman and sophomore, she got a part-time job as a Lexmark rep, which the printers happened to be in my department. And, you know, I went up to her and, you know, just started talking to her. I'm like, oh, I'm the manager of this section.
You're being coy, man. You were spinning some game, huh?
Yeah. And she was printing out some pictures, right? And I was like, oh, is that your boyfriend? Is that your boy? She's like, no. Oh, you don't have a boyfriend? And, you know, and then we started talking, and I could honestly say that, like, I fell in love with this girl, like, super quick. Like within a couple weeks, I was already like, oh my God, I'm so in love with this girl. So we started dating, and it was a long distance. She had to go back to school, right? She was just there for the summer. And we became kind of official, like boyfriend, girlfriend. And she went back to Santa Barbara. And that was rough, right? That was rough because I was working at Best Buy, but then on my, you know, I had my daughter, so that I was still having to manage that, you know, the time between, you know, the mom and dad, you know, and she, you know, I would have her on my 2 days off. But then now all of a sudden I had a long distance relationship that also was tough, because like it's either on my 2 days off, you know, have my daughter, or I would go drive to Santa Barbara to go be with my girlfriend. Right. So that was really hard to manage. And it was just like another kind of plate that I had to juggle. And as part of that, you know, as it became harder and harder to manage that, you know, we would get into little arguments, right? And my wife, she says this never happened, but this is how I remember it. We got into an argument, and I was like, whatever, like, you're long distance, you're over there partying. This is Santa Barbara, right? I mean,
Right.
it's a party school, right?
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, they're partying. I'm over here working and like got my kids and like,
Yeah.
and then she's like, well, yeah, you wouldn't understand. Like, you didn't go to college. And I was like,
Oh.
oh, like that hurt. Like that, like my ego was just like, and by the way, I'm still playing music, by the way,
Right.
at this
I
point.
was gonna say,
So
yeah.
now
you still,
there's 4 things I'm kind of juggling, right?
right. That's a lot of plates you're spinning at
On
this
my
moment.
days off.
Yeah.
So she's like, you didn't go to college. And I was like, what? I was like, you know what? I bet you I could have gone to college. And even if I went to college, I would rip up that diploma because it's worthless. Because you know what? I'm going to be a rock star. I was like, I don't need it.
Wow.
I'm making tons of money over here. I'm making like 6 digits over at Best Buy.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm going to become a rock star. Like, I don't need education. Get out of here.
Dang.
But deep down inside, that stung. And that really did. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm going to go to community college and let me see what the classes look like. And this is just me in my head, like just my ego.
Was this to show her, or was it more to prove to yourself? Because I understand one of the fears I think I've had my whole life, for some reason, maybe it makes sense, is like, I'm not smart.
Yeah.
And there were so many times in life where I was like, even after I graduated college, I was like, I don't think I was smart. I felt like the way I got through college was just by showing up and then communicating.
Yeah.
Like, hey, how does this work? How do you do it? How do you study? What does this mean? Like communication, I still never felt smart until I went to flight school.
Yeah.
So why do you, is it to prove to yourself? Is it to prove to her?
I think it was both, right? It was a little piece of me was still trying to make my mom proud, right? Because I knew my mom was really into education, all that. That was part of it.
Okay.
A big part of it was the ego, right? It was like hey, wait a second. I'm not going to be equal to her, right? Because I saw her as like, she got her life together. She was going to college. She knew she was going to law school right after. She came from a good family, and I felt inferior. And I think that was a big part of it. I felt inferior because of my upbringing and like because of like, just the economic status and all that stuff. There's always that sense of like, I'm poor. I don't have enough money. I can't afford to give you certain things. And she's on her way to do it. So part of it was that. It was like, hey, I need to show her that I'm worthy, right? That I'm also gonna do that. 3, my daughter, right? That was the other thing too. Like I was like, I want to do better for my daughter. And if going to school is going to get me a better job, right? Even though I was really happy at Best Buy, I was like, let me do that. So I did. So I signed up at, Southwestern College, and I took 2 classes. I took an African-American studies class, and I took an Asian American study class, like Asian history classes.
Okay.
And because again, I was like, what do I like? I was like, I love history. I'm like, let me do some history.
Okay.
So on my 2 days off, so because I was a manager, I was able to schedule myself like, because usually in college, it's like Mondays and Wednesdays or Tuesdays and Thursdays, right?
Right.
So I was able to schedule myself around my school schedule. So I took those 2 classes, but think about it. Yeah. Those 2 days off are critical for me in my life. It's the time where I either have my daughter, or it's the time that I go and see my girlfriend.
Right.
Or the times I go and play music.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm thinking like, so now you're working 5 days a week. You're taking 2 days a week you're in classes. Where does the girlfriend come in? Where does the daughter come in? Where does music come in? Because that's not a lot of time for those things.
Yeah. It was strategic scheduling on my part, where I knew like, okay, on Sunday, I would schedule myself to get off at like, noon. And then on Monday, I would schedule myself to close. So it would give me a full day, and I would drive up to Santa Barbara, spend, even a few hours with her, and drive back. Like that was insane, going back and forth so many times.
Yeah. If that's not love, I don't know what is, man. That's
or
that's
I learned how to do back-to-back schedules, where I was like, okay, like I would get off, or I'd give myself like the days off, at the end of this schedule and the beginning of the next schedule. Then I was able to manage some of it. But nevertheless, when school came about, I had to take Tuesdays and Thursdays off, or Mondays and Wednesdays, because those are my, or sometimes I wouldn't. I would make myself close, on those days. But anyways, all of a sudden it's like 7 days a week I have something going on, and I did that, for 2 years until. Again, my wife denies this, but she was finishing up school, and in my mind also I was just like, with this associate's degree is not going to do anything. Like, I have to transfer to a 4-year college in order for me to do that. And by then I was good. It was surprising. I was getting straight A's. I was like, this is weird. It was a lot easier for me kind of as an adult to go back to school. And especially because I was taking a history class. I was a history major, and I loved it. I enjoyed it. I really had a passion for it. So I decided to apply to UC San Diego as a history major. And I got in. And that was one of those things where, I just wanted to kind of go along and follow along. And I figured, look, she's almost done at UC Santa Barbara. She'll come back. We'll move in together. I'll finish up school, and everything's working out great.
Right.
So I got into UC San Diego, and around that time, my wife got into law school.
Okay.
And the problem with that is that, so she did move to San Diego briefly, right after college.
Okay.
For that summer. So we were
living. You got to spend a lot more time together in this moment. Right after you graduated.
So we were living together around that time.
Okay.
And then she drops the news that she got accepted to law school in LA. She went to USC.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, oh my God, we just did like 3 years long distance. Like, I just got into UC San Diego. Now you're going to move to LA. Like, this is devastating for me. Like, what are we going to do?
Are you guys still dating at this point? You're not married yet, right?
We're not married yet. We're still dating, but we're living together. In that summer we moved in together. That was tough because, again, I felt like I ended up anchoring myself even more to San Diego, because now it's like I'm working full time at Best Buy. Now I got accepted to UC San Diego.
Yep.
I got my daughter here. Yep. And it just like anchored me so much more. And then now she's leaving to LA to go to law school.
Yeah.
So that was tough. That was really tough. And after the first semester in law school, she was there. I couldn't do it. I was just like, I can't. Like, I want to be with her. I want to be, I don't want to do a long distance relationship.
Yeah.
So I made the decision, and this was tough because I had been at Best Buy by then for like 8 years. I decided to leave the store that I was in and transfer to LA.
Oh, wow.
To a Best Buy in LA. But at that point, I was already locked in at UC San Diego. I couldn't transfer to UCLA or anything like that. I'm stuck at San Diego.
Okay.
So I made the choice to go to LA. We moved in together in LA. She was going to law school. I was working at Best Buy in Northridge, so it's a little bit north of LA.
Yeah, that's kind of where Christina's from.
Yeah,
it's kind of from that area. Yeah,
yeah. Right by CSUN. And I would schedule my 2 days off and drive to San Diego to go to UC San Diego to finish my classes. So for another 2 years, on my 2 days off, I would commute to San Diego just to go to class. I would spend all day at school. I would try to do everything I could on those 2 days off, as far as like homework or reports or reading, whatever I needed to. And UC San Diego it's a tough school. Like, it's, and it's quarterly system. So it's quick. It's 10 weeks, like boom, boom, and next quarter.
Yeah. I mean, this is so much. And there's so many things that you love about all these things differently. Yeah. But where are you finding this drive? I mean, I know it's in you, but like, what are you, how are you doing it? Like, how are you telling yourself, like, you just got to keep going. You got to do this. Give me a little taste of, like, you wake up in the morning, you wash your face, brush your teeth, you're looking in the mirror. What's going on in your head?
I think I learned to value like every hour of the day already from when I was going, I was working at Best Buy on my 2 days off, going to community college, trying to balance my daughter and my girlfriend long distance. Again, I learned to really value each day, and as far as like time wise, right? And I became really good at organizing my time, especially in 4-hour blocks. And I was like, I couldn't just not be still for 4 hours. I had to go do something, right? So that's kind of what I just got really good at managing my time, really, and
Yeah.
that's really where it came from. And again, at that point, it was also just
Crazy.
finishing school was now a huge driving motivator for me because I was
Mm.
so close to it and I was getting good grades and I was really
Yeah.
proud of myself. I was like, wow, like I wish I would have known that I could do this even before. I never thought I could go to college because I thought my parents had bad credit. My parents don't have money. They can't afford to send me to college.
Right.
I didn't realize like you didn't need them. You could apply for loans and
Right.
student.
That there were other avenues that you could do
Yeah,
it to get there and everything. Yeah.
yeah,
Which I think, I mean, I'm sure a lot of kids don't know it, but it probably with immigrant parents too, they probably don't know it. You're like, well, I don't even know what a student loan is or
right.
all that. Yeah.
And it was because of my wife. She's the one who opened my eyes to like I saw the pathway, and that's
Mm.
crucial. I think for any career, you want to find someone that you can actually see the path. Like you could actually the steps to get there.
Yeah.
And she's the one who opened my eyes to that path. And I
Mm.
saw the path to college and I saw the path to law school. I didn't know it then,
Mm-hmm.
but I saw that path, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was living in LA. I was finishing up at UCSD and I was about to get my bachelor's degree in history with the emphasis on war, revolution, and social change. That's my degree.
Man, that's right up Andor.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
So, I could.
One of the best shows. I can imagine.
Yo,
You have a lot to
politically,
say about that.
socially. Oh my God, there's so many parallels. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I finished up. I got my bachelor's degree, and I almost felt like now I have all this time on my hands, even though I really didn't, because I was still working full time at Best Buy. I still have my daughter. I still was balancing all these things.
Right.
But all of a sudden, I had these 2 days off, and I was like, "What am I gonna do? Like, I can't just sit around."
Yeah.
So I was in LA, and I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna open up a business." And the reason why that came about was because I told my wife, I was like, "Hey, like, maybe I should go to law school. Like, maybe you think I should take the LSAT and apply?" She's like, "No, you're gonna hate it. Like, it's not for you. Like, it's absolutely horrible. Don't do it." I was like,
Right.
I was like, "You're right. Like, I'm not gonna do that." Like, I got my history. I was like,
Which is crazy where you're at now.
right. And I was like, "So what do I do? Like, I have this history degree. Like, what do I do with this history degree?" I'm like,
Yeah.
it kind of was worthless. Like it was, because again, I was making 6 figures at Best Buy at that point.
Wow.
I was like, I was still playing music, but again, because I had to move to LA, that band kind of broke up, but I was still really geared into music. I was like,
Wait. The band broke up. What are you feeling like at that moment? Because that was a dream, right? Like, I'm going to be a rock star.
yeah,
Like that seems like a huge thing to all of a sudden come to grips with. Was it?
it did. It felt like a breakup. And it wasn't because, yeah, part of it was me moving, but obviously I was still going down to San Diego for those 2 days. So like we're trying to make it work at that point. But I think it was just more of like the other members also started growing up, right? And they started having the families of their own and stuff like that. So that was brutal for me. That it felt like a breakup. But at that point, I geared over to like, like I'm gonna write my own music. I'm gonna do like acoustic, or I'm gonna do like I got really weirdly into like drum and bass music, and I was like, I'm gonna be a DJ. I'm gonna be like a drum and bass DJ. Anyways, music was still always kind of there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so around that time, I was like, well, what do I do? And she's like, yeah, why don't you just start a business? And I was like, I don't have any money to start a business. Like, and one of the things that I did right before graduating UCSD is my last quarter, because I was making good money at Best Buy. I had applied just, for student loans, and I ended up paying off my car with it instead of using it for like school. Because I was like, it's less interest. Like the payment's going to be lower. I'm just going to pay off my car and use that student loan.
All right.
So anyways, because this is key for what's coming up.
All right.
So I decided to open up a business, right? And I was like, I don't have any money. I don't have any money saved up in the bank. I don't have anything. I kind of was still living almost paycheck to paycheck, even though I was making good money at Best Buy. I wasn't managing my money very well. But I was like, so what kind of business? I was like, you know what? I think I want to open up like a little skate shop, like a little skate record shop. I was like, that'd be really cool. And around that time, my wife's finishing up law school, and we're already planning to move back to San Diego.
Okay.
Because she was going to get a job down here.
Okay.
And I was like, well, maybe I'll open up a little business. I got to transfer back to Best Buy in San Diego, but I'll do that. That's fine. So around that transition, we went and visited her sister, and my brother-in-law, who's really, just he owns all these businesses and all that. I asked him, I was like, I was gonna open up this skate shop, little record shop. He's like, no. This was around 2012. He was like, don't do it. He's like, avoid anything retail. You can't compete with online markets. Everything's gonna be cheaper online. Like, it's not gonna work. She's like, focus on services. If you can find a good service,
Yeah.
the online, they can't take it away from you.
Right, right.
Amazon can't take that away.
Yeah.
And I was
they
like,
can't send like an overnight service for you
Right.
to go do something.
so I was like, well, what kind of service would be a cool thing that kind of, merges all my passions? And I was like, oh, you know what? What if I opened up a tattoo shop? I was like, huh. So I called up my buddy who had already had done like my sleeve when I was doing the music thing. And I was like, hey man, like, can I take you out to lunch? I want to know about the tattoo industry. Like, how does that work?
yeah.
So I went, met up with them, and he kind of told me how it works. I was like, all right, cool. Like, that sounds like I should do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
By then, in that time, we had already moved back to San Diego. My wife was an attorney already working. I'm at Best Buy. So I have, which made me feel super inferior, by the way, because she was already, we would go to like these events and these parties, and I'm amongst attorneys, and it's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, like, I'm a manager at Best Buy, right?
Yeah.
Like, it made me feel so little, like,
Yeah.
and
Which is, I understand, but it's
Yeah.
like you were making good money. You're providing for
yeah.
your daughter. And was she your wife at this time, or was she still, were you guys still boyfriend, girlfriend?
We were engaged at that time.
Okay. Okay.
And this is,
yeah.
and actually, this is kind of what led to that. That's actually a great way to lead into it, because we were planning our wedding, and we were trying to like save up for our wedding.
Mhm.
So one day I was like, you know what? Like, we don't have really money to like get married like that. So I was like, I wonder if there's like loans like at banks that you can get for weddings or like for events
Yeah.
like that. So I went into a little credit union, and I made an appointment. I asked them, I was like, hey, do you guys do like, loans for this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
They're like, no, we do personal loans, but or loans that are based off of some collateral, right? Like, if you had some asset, like, do you own a house or a car? And I was like, oh, I do own my car,
Yeah.
because I had paid it off with my student loans. I was like, I own my car. It was a 2005 Mustang. I was like, I own this car. They're like, okay, well, I mean, she like looks it up. She's like, oh, like, you qualify for like, I think it was like $10,000 for the car and a $4,000 line of credit, like just separate, like on a credit card.
All right.
And I was like, okay, well, let me get back to you. That might be enough to at least get some of the wedding stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
By then, I really hadn't been thinking about the business anymore. Like, it was because we're in this transitional phase where I was, transferring back to Best Buy here, and my wife was starting to work and all that stuff.
Right.
So, I kind of just one day I was just like, you know what? What if I use that money and I open up a tattoo shop? I was like, that would work. And then I could, say that I own this tattoo shop, and like,
yeah.
I'm going to do that. So I started applying all around San Diego and started calling like real estate agents, like all in San Diego,
Mhm.
and nobody
Trying to
would
find
locations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nobody
yeah.
wanted a tattoo shop there. And
Mm.
I'm naive me, like, thinking that like it was really easy. I'm just going to go in there and rent the shop, and my buddy that did the tattoos, he was like, yeah, I'll go tattoo at your shop. I was like, great. Like, this is going to be fantastic.
Easy. Yeah. I'll be racking it up. after that.
Nobody wanted tattoo shops at their place, because, and even it was 2012, even then, I mean, tattoos were a little more common. There was more people that are getting tattoos, but still, it was
Totally.
still associated with kind of
Yeah, this
criminals and-
interpretation that it's going to bring in the wrong crowd, and rough people or whatever
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
So nobody would rent to me. And then
Wow.
finally I like submitted this application to a mall, and the mall hit me back up. They're like, yeah, we'll let you open up a tattoo shop. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. And at a mall, right?
Yeah.
So I went in, literally, I think it was like the next day I went to the bank. I was like, let me get that loan. Let me get that line of credit. I went to the mall like a dummy. I signed like a 2-year agreement,
Okay.
thinking, all right, let's do this.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
signed the agreement, and I'm like, let's go. Didn't even
Mhm.
negotiate it, nothing. I was just like, let's go.
Wow.
And I walk out of there, and I'm like, what's next? Google. I'm like, how do I open up a tattoo shop?
No
By the way, I
way.
already had locked into this like
Yeah, you're like, wait, now how do I figure out how to do this business after you had just signed the lease and the contract?
right. And by the way, I'm working full time at Best Buy. So this is all happening my 2 days off, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
now I'm like, so what's next? Oh, well, you need a permit. Great. That's easy. I look it up. It's like $80 or something like that. The city of Chula Vista. I'll go to the city of Chula Vista on my day off. Hello, I'd like to apply for a tattoo shop permit. They're like, have you checked with zoning first? And I was like, no. What's zoning? I don't know what zoning is.
Right.
I go across the way. I ask, and they're like, well, tattoo shops are adult entertainment for the city of Chula Vista.
Oh.
So because there's a middle school, a couple blocks away, you need a conditional use permit. The conditional use permit application is $3,000.
Oh.
And it takes about 6 to 8 months to
Whew.
get. And I'm like,
my God.
like my heart sank because again, I was locked into that
Right.
I was already paying rent for it. I had $14,000 that I could use to as a
open this
buffer.
thing. Yeah.
And all of a sudden there went $3,000.
Yeah. An additional. And then who knows when you're going to actually start making money.
I hadn't even taken the blue paint off the windows. I didn't, it used to be,
It's bare bones.
it used to be an old jewelry shop.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I hadn't even looked inside. I was just like, this is going to be great. It'll be easy to create that. So it's almost like, like in a movie or a show where it's already, it's like half baked.
Yeah.
Remember where he takes the date and he has I forgot how many dollars and it's like, like every
Right,
time
keeps going down.
he takes them that's kind of how I felt. I went in there and I was just like, oh man, okay, so that's $3,000. And I was like, okay, I have $11,000 kind of at my disposal.
Right.
All right. So after that, I started building out the shop. The shop. I spent maybe $1,000 on furniture at IKEA. Just
whatever you could do to
just
furnish
basic
it.
stuff. So I budgeted. I was like, okay, if I spend $2,000 on furniture, $2,000 on flooring, $2,000. So I portioned it out, but I also had to pay rent.
Yeah.
So that was part of it that I was starting to pay.
Man.
And a month went by. I was doing everything myself. On my 2 days off, I would get friends to come and help me paint, help do the floor. We went through that on my 2 days off from Best Buy, and really just started working. There's some great pictures of my daughter, who at that point was maybe 10 years old.
Okay.
She's there she's working on the tattoo shop. 2-3 months go by and I still don't have this conditional use permit. So I go back and I'm like, well, what do you need? Is there extra things? Oh, the next step, you need to hire an architect because we need the blueprints,
oh my
gosh. to do this process. So I was like, I'm not going to hire an architect. I don't have enough. I'm going to go on Photoshop and do it myself. So I did. I looked up online how to how blueprints looked.
Okay.
I made my own blueprints. I spent probably $400 printing out all these sets of these huge blueprints, right? And I had asked the mall and see if they had their original blueprints.
That's smart. That's real
So
smart.
all I did is Photoshop little squares, where I said the booths were going to be. And I take it in and there's this one guy, he was super rude to me. And he was just like, why are you bringing all these? I was like, you told me that you needed all these blueprints.
Right.
He's like, no. You only needed this and that. And, I don't know if you're ever going to get approved, if you don't bring in certain things. And I was just furious the way he treated me. I mean, again, part of it, I think I look younger than I am. I'm all tattooed, I'm going in there kind of just almost loosey-goosey, asking questions, being really personable about it,
Right.
And I got so upset that he was treating me like that. Where I was just wait a second, I'm trying to open up a business in my city.
Right.
Why are you treating me like that? So I was like, you know
100%.
what? I stepped outside, I grabbed my laptop and I sent an email to the elected representative that's in charge of zoning and his supervisor. And I said, look, I could have gone to any other city and I wouldn't have to do this zoning permit. I would have been open by now.
Right.
But I wanted to do it in my city and, where I feel a close connection to that,
Right.
especially that mall. That's the mall where I worked at. That's the movie theater that I worked at for so many years.
Wow.
Same exact mall.
Wow.
And
What a
I
full
was-
circle moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just don't understand. Is it a form of like maybe discrimination that I'm going through? Like
Sure.
what's going on?
Mhm.
Sure enough, the next day I get a call from the elected official and he's like, I'm so sorry, what's going on? We're going to expedite your permit.
Let's go.
Come in. So I ended up getting the permit, probably maybe a couple weeks after that. So by then I was already maybe 3 months in.
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
the lesson you think you take away from this? Because you're right. It was a little bit preemptive. It was a little bit just on passion and like, I'm just going to book it. And, now you tell people, hey, make sure you do all the legwork and blah, blah, blah. But like, what's a lesson that you take away from this?
Now the lesson is just do it. The way I've gotten to where I am in life is I Forrest Gump my way through it. I just do it. I just go and just do it without thinking. And sometimes that's the best way to do it because I am an overthinker and I can convince myself out of things.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's better to do it without thinking and just kind of hope for the best,
Wow.
And I think that's been kind of my philosophy now in life is I say just like Nike, right? Just do it. Stop
Yeah.
making excuses. Like, and
Right.
I tell that to even my siblings and stuff. I'm like, we're not victims. Like,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
just do it. And if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have opened up the shop. But check this out. It doesn't stop there because even after I got the permit,
Mhm.
I Google like, what's next after the health department. Oh my, that was a nightmare. Long story short, I was out of money.
Mhm.
This was November. I started this process probably in June
Okay.
2012.
Yeah.
November is here. I'm out of money. I'm using my paychecks from Best Buy to pay the rent. I had hired, my buddy who's a tattoo artist bailed out on me. So I had no artists.
Oh my
I
gosh.
get my health permit. I get everything. Everything's lined up. I don't have artists. I have to put like a Craigslist ad to find artists. I finally find 3 artists.
Mhm.
And it was like November 10th, I want to say, or something like that, that I was just like, we're going to open. And if
Yeah.
it doesn't hit this month's rent or like next month's rent,
Mhm.
that's it. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
to close it down. And I'm going to be default on my loan. And
Wow.
that's going to just ruin everything. Right.
Yeah. What a small runway you had.
But luckily that month it hit rent. We hit bills. The next month it hit bills and we hit rent. And here we are 13 years later. And today, actually, we're having, Friday the 13th sale and the lines are backed up like a block around. And that tattoo shop is still up 13 years later.
What?
but-
That's insane.
13 years later, it's still there. And it's such a cool, just to know, hey, I own this tattoo shop. We
Mhm.
built it from the ground up and it's been
Literally,
there.
man.
But yeah, and we're not even how I became an attorney.
I know. Yeah. And that's the thing too. I know we don't have
Yeah.
too much time.
Yeah.
And again, like, okay, I love that lesson. Just go for it. Just do it.
Do it.
It's amazing, because
Yeah.
I think there's so many people in life who don't go for it,
Yeah,
right?
that's-
They have this dream
Yeah.
or they have this calling and they're like, they don't do it. And it seems like you are always drawn from one passion to the
Yeah.
next. And we haven't even gotten to like, you become this attorney and it's amazing. I've seen you in action and my wife got to work with you and we haven't even gotten to like now the other side
content.
of content, and
Yeah.
creating and
I'll speed it up because again, like I said, it is a long process and I do feel like I've lived multiple lives, right? There's
For sure.
multiple like big parts of my life. So okay. Now I'm at Best Buy full time.
Mhm.
I have this tattoo shop, right? That I opened up on my 2 days off.
yeah.
I have my bachelor's degree, got my daughter, my wife, now we're getting married.
Yeah.
We decide-
Wait, how did you pay for the wedding? Because
So-
you did it because you used
so-
the 14,000 for the
So
tattoo
check
shop.
this out. So this is another big thing.
Yeah.
So we're still saving up money, and we're getting, we're getting money to get married. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Like, we got to buy a house. Like, that's the smart investment right now. Let's buy a house.
Okay.
So I convinced my wife to take all the money that we saved and put it down for a down payment on a house.
Okay.
And I said, you know what? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I know, like, you know, you wanted this wedding, but like, I think right now is smart to let's buy a house. Let's go get married somewhere fun. Like, you know, go and do like elope and go do something cool. And then we'll just have a big party at the house.
Okay. Right.
And which was one of the best decisions I think we made as a couple, 100%, especially how the market is right now.
Sure.
We did. We invested in a house. We got a small little house, and we got married at Disneyland under the castle, guerrilla style.
Oh, no way.
So we got my buddy who's an ordained minister. We set up a camera and we just did it. We just got married under the castle. Wow. And then we're just like, let's back up, let's go. So, and it was just funny because like I posted on YouTube, and it kind of went viral. They made a news story about us, like, oh, San Diego couple gets married guerrilla style at Disneyland.
Wow. Okay, that happens. Are you doing collecting and content creating?
No.
No? Is that the first thing you do where you're like, oh my gosh, I can make something that goes viral?
That kind of did. It kind of gave me that it opened up my eyes to going viral. Okay. It absolutely did. And again, it was early stages of social media, right? I don't think YouTube was even, I mean, it was already there, but it wasn't like what it is right now,
yeah.
right? Because this was what, 2013-ish, 2012, around there.
Yeah.
So
like 13 years ago at this point. Well, yeah, it's changed a lot in these 13 years.
I don't think they're monetizing it like the way it is now and all that stuff. So, but yeah, anyways, I upload that, and yeah, so we get married, and around that time, Best Buy is going through a restructure. And let me back up. When I was in LA, right before moving to San Diego, like right before this, I said, you know what? Let me study for the LSAT, and let me just see how I do.
Right.
So in that summer that we're transitioning back to San Diego, I took an LSAT class at CSUN actually. And I took the LSAT, and I didn't do very good. And again, I think I couldn't focus on it. I was working full time. We were moving.
I don't know how you could have, like, so with all the other things you have going on.
Yeah. So I didn't do that well on the LSAT. So it was just one of those things like, whatever. I'm not going to go to law school. So whatever. It was there. But I had already done all the process. Like, I had taken the LSAT. I had gotten my letters of rec. Like, I've done all the like steps that you needed to apply to law school. But I was like, I'm not going to get in. So I scrapped that. So then the shop and all that stuff. And it's like years later, or maybe like a year or two later after that, Best Buy is going through a restructure. And by then I had been at Best Buy for about 11 years. Wow. So again, it was a career for me. And I mean, a lot of my close friends were from Best Buy. It was like a family. And one day my general manager pulls me into the office like, hey, like our store is getting impacted by this restructure. There's 2 managers. They're going to cut it down to 1. I want to let you know that I'm going to keep you, but we're going to get rid of this other manager, this girl who's like a single mom. She had like, kids and all that. And I was like, well, thank you so much. Like, I appreciate it. Like, that's a relief, like I get to keep my job. Probably about maybe 4 months before that, I had gotten an email, because when you apply, like when you do the LSAT, you start getting spammed with all these like random law schools that are just apply here, but not the big ones. It's usually like the little
people are hungry for students and everything. Yeah.
I remember getting one from Cal Western School of Law here in San Diego, and it was like, oh, free, like apply for free. We'll waive your application fee. And I was like, oh, like all I have to do is literally just like push 2 buttons and like apply. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get in. So again, this was 4 months before I applied and just forgot about it. I forgot that I did it. So that day she pulls me in, she tells me about the layoffs. She's like, I'm going to keep you. I've already submitted the paperwork. Like, you're going to stay. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I kid you not, man. I get home that night. I'm telling my wife, at that point we have a house, we're married. I'm like, yeah, good. Like, I got my job. Like, I'm secure.
Right.
I open up my email and it's like, congratulations. You've been accepted to Cal Western School of Law. Please let us know of your acceptance. You got, and all this. And I was just like, That
What?
night, I kid you not, it was that night. And I was like, what? I was like, what do I do?
Right.
And I'm asking my wife, and I was like, do I go to law school? Like, what is going on?
I mean, that would be such a trip, on something you just did on a whim.
It was. And she's like, it's up to you. Like, I mean, if you want to, it's a lot of work. It's hard. Like, you can't work. Like, you have to quit, right? Like, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So you got to figure it out. And that night was just so tough, just in my mind, because I was like, if I go, like, I have no job. I mean, I have the tattoo shop, but like, I don't have a job. Like, I still have my daughter. I have a mortgage. I have
There's
like
so much you have to weigh between accepting this and not accepting.
Yeah.
This. So much.
And the next day I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Just do it. What? Stop thinking about it.
What?
So overnight. So think about it. I probably looked at that email maybe 8 p.m.
Yeah.
And I told my manager the next day when I went in. So like, again, it was one of those decisions where it was just like, I'm just going to do it. Like, F this. Like, I'm just going to do it. So I go the next day. I tell my manager, hey, can you swap us? Can you swap me and keep her and give me the severance package? I got accepted to law school. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you, Gabe. Like this and that. So she did. She swapped us. I ended up getting a severance package because I'd been there for 11 years. That ended up paying for at least my first semester of law school. Like, or at least help the stability of the household, right?
That's great. Yeah.
My wife's already an attorney. She's already practicing. And I just quit my job of 11 years and decided to go to law school. And that's where I met my partner, Ray. It was Inflow. So you know.
Love Ray.
It was literally day one. He is literally my day one because we took this summer course to it's like an intro to, to law school, like how to prepare for law school. And he was one of my first friends there that we kind of, knew each other. So, so I went to law school, man. I left everything and decided to go to law school. And that was scary. That was a huge life decision.
Yeah. I don't even want to fast forward through your whole career in law school, but it's like, you just keep stepping into bravery, right? Like, and it's crazy. I think so much of us ruminate on our choices and we're like, we could do this, or we could do this. And sometimes thinking about things too long talks us out of us going for it, right?
100%.
And it is incredible though that you go for this, but also that you succeed through it too. It's like the tattoo shop could have easily fell back on your face. You could have easily moving up to LA with your girlfriend at the time could have easily not worked out, and then trying to go to San Diego State could have been this, waste of money, but somehow you keep powering through and succeeding. What is that about you? That it does work out where you say, I'm just going to do it, but then it works.
I'm generally optimistic. I'm optimistic, right? Until I'm not, right? Until I convince myself out of it, or until I start stressing out so much. But again, I think my wife has been a crucial part of it, because even at those moments where I'm faced with these stressful decisions and stressful, thoughts, she's the one who grounds me every time. And she's the one who's like, you can do this. Why are you stressing out like this? Just do it or don't do it. And she's the one who kind of pulls me back in and makes me realize. And sometimes I have to kind of just blow up in order for me to kind of center myself back down and be like, things aren't as bad as I'm making them seem to be, right? Everything's good. We're fine. So I think it's that optimism going into it. I went to law school, went through it. My first semester, I had my daughter with, my middle daughter, which was tough. I mean, anyone who's gone to law school could tell you that first year it was rough because they cut the bottom 30% or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I remember Christina so worried about that her first year.
Yeah. So you're competing with everyone. And all of a sudden I had a fresh baby 3 weeks before my first finals. So, but luckily my wife, because she was an attorney, she was very understanding. And she was very even when she was in labor, we're at the hospital and I had to take this test, this grammar test that they make you take. And core grammar. And I'm like sitting there stressing out because you could only miss, I think it was like at 100 questions, you could only miss 10. Like you had to get a 90 or above.
Right.
And I kept on getting like an 88 or 86. And I'm like, oh my, and it takes like an hour to complete because it's such a long test. And
meanwhile, your wife is like screaming and she's like, this baby's coming.
She's in labor. And I'm asking her questions. I'm like, hey, like, what do you think like this one is like that? So she ends up helping me through it while she's in labor. And I'm like,
insane.
And I'm like, I have to do it now because if we wait until the baby's here, I'm not gonna have time to like focus on this. Right. You're not gonna have time to help me like kind of get through it. Wow. So she's literally giving birth, like while she's in labor. And she's like,
contractions are happening.
Yeah, and I'm doing this stupid law school test that, which is it was just so anyways, I take my finals, I get through it, I get through the first year, I get through my second year, we get through my third year, and I'm still like, in my mind, it was a vacation, to tell you the truth. Like it was kind of weird because a lot of people in law school like just are so stressed and all that. But I think it's because they went from like high school to college and then law school. So they know this kind of like similar rhythm, right? That they're getting. Yeah. And all of a sudden they get thrown in with like all this extra stuff because you got to read and you got to brief and you got to do all this stuff extra on top of your classes.
Right.
But for me, I was like, I don't have to go to work at Best Buy. That gives me 5 extra days to do whatever I want.
Right.
The tattoo shop's running on its own. Like it's doing good.
Yeah.
My daughter's older. Obviously we had the new baby.
Right.
But I was like,
but
dude,
you've already done that
law
before.
School? I'm like, this is a vacation for me. Wow. All I have to do is focus on school. Wow. Like if I could have done that at UCSD instead of working and going back and forth on my 2 days off, right. I'm like, that would have been amazing. So I used it or I treated it as a job.
Yeah.
I said, law school is a job. It's my 9 to 5.
Yep.
And how much I can get done in 9 to 5 in my mind, I'm like, this is, piece of cake. I mean, I'm not saying that law school is a piece of cake. It's not. It's super hard.
No, but relative to what you had experienced most of your life.
Correct. Yeah.
And especially in your adult life, and you had so many people to juggle and responsibilities and facets of life. And you had grown up so quickly. Yeah, I'm sure it did kind of feel like, wait, this is just one thing.
Yeah.
There's not all these million other things.
Yeah.
Do you ever think like what you went through maybe was kind of a blessing in a way because of how it helped you in law school?
It did. Yeah, it absolutely did. I think having that stress and having, learning how to manage my time and really budget my time was crucial. I don't think I would have been able to do it without that skill. And especially like towards the bar, right? Like once you graduate, that's one thing. But once you start studying for the bar, you've been through that.
It was tense in the household, that's for sure.
It's because, it's these, 6 months, of your life that are either going to make or break you. Because if you don't pass that bar exam, like I have to work, I have to make money to pay my mortgage, to pay, to feed my family
loans and like all that.
I'm like, if I don't pass on this first try, I think I'm going to go back to Best Buy. Like, what else can I do? Like, I can't just sit around applying and waiting and all that. Like, I need money now to pay my bills.
Right.
That was stressful. So I treated also just like a job, studying for the bar. I would wait. And because at that point, I had my kids too. So like, I had to like,
buckle down.
I would wake up at like 5 a.m, make my coffee, study from like, 6 to 9, then go to the classes at the school from like 9 to 12, come back, eat lunch, come back home and study from, 12 to 5, knowing that as soon as my wife got home, and with my daughters, it's family time at the end. And then at night, right before bed, I would study, maybe another hour or two. The other thing too, I'm a really slow typer. So for me, you need to type super fast for the bar exam because it's like nonstop.
Essays
it's
and
4 hours nonstop of just typing times. In the morning, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. That's day one because I took the last 3-day bar.
Wow.
Second day, it's 4 hours of multiple choice, 4 hours of multiple choice. Third day is 4 hours of writing and then 4 hours of writing. So it's a 3-day test, 8 hours a day of just like nonstop. So anyway, so I had to get good at typing. So I would spend every day just practicing, just typing. But I passed the bar. I became an attorney, and that was that was a huge accomplishment. I think that was the first time that I saw my dad. My mom, she was already proud that I was going to school and all that stuff. My mom was always super proud, but that was for her, right? They gave up a lot to come to the United States, for me, because it really was for me. And to give them that back was huge. To say like, look, all that sacrifice you made, here it is. Like I'm an attorney, right? Like I like did what you wanted, mom. Like I went to school, I became an attorney, and it was the first time that I saw my dad proud in a different way. Like he was really proud that I became an attorney, and it was always felt like it's like, oh, it's not a real job. You're just kind of messing around and all that. And it was the first time that my dad was just like super proud of what I did. So I felt very accomplished in that sense, right?
Oh,
now again, now all of a sudden I got my law degree. I'm an attorney. I passed the bar. I still got the tattoo shop. I got my family. So that leaves so much time, as you know, for other activities.
All right.
So around that time is when I started collecting my Star Wars stuff. Well, like displaying it and making videos on YouTube about my Star Wars stuff. So that's where the content creation came, because around that time, I was collecting the Star Wars stuff, and I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to make a little video. And I made a video, I posted it on YouTube, and that's where that leads into that.
You're an amazing individual, and it's like crazy to see all of the life that you had lived before you get to this point, where I think a lot of people know you now for the Star Wars collection and for your incredible room and all the content you make around Star Wars and the events you get to go to. But it's like that's like one sliver of this journey of your life. And you've done so many amazing things from since you were a little kid to what you had to do to grow up to moving, and people who don't know, who are listening, for other parts of the country, San Diego to LA seemingly sounds close, but we know it could take you 2.5 hours sometimes with traffic, and there's tons of side streets and just, it's not as easy always just to bounce back and forth, but to two different relationships and to kids and to career and to then becoming a student again. You are just this amazing person. And the way what I'm getting kind of just talking to you for this whole time is like the way you look at adversity is you're able to just kind of just look at the goal. I can sense that because I just hearing when you talk about it, I feel the stress. It's like when you watch Uncut Gems or something, you're just like so stressed out and you're tense, but you have this way of just kind of focusing on the goal and what the result's going to be, and then just believing that you can get there. And I think anybody in the entire world can tap into that. It seems like it was inherent in you. It seems like it was also a product of how you grew up. And I would love to talk even more about the content creation, but I think one thing, and it's something I ask everybody, 2 questions. One question is, I'm going to flip it this time. I'm going to go with the second question I usually ask, which is if somebody is going through their moment where they're the most stressed and they're like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I just signed this crazy lease for this business and I don't even know how it's going to make money or if I can even bring in business with it. What's one piece of advice you would give them where they're at their most stressed, their most like lost, their most scared moment?
Set priorities. That's always been something that I do, right? I'm balancing a lot of plates, right?
Yeah.
Just like everyone else. I mean, even my plates were just happen to be those specific ones, but everyone's balancing, different responsibilities, whether it's family, job, whatever it is, right? You're balancing a lot. You have to prioritize which plate is more important at all times. So there was times where my family was the priority, right? Where that had to take first priority. There's times where work had to take first priority. There's times where school had to take first priority, right? So that definitely prioritize your stress, right? And make sure that you're focusing on the one that that's more important at that time. Now it might change, but prioritize.
Prioritize. Okay. Focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
I love it, man. It's fantastic. The next question is currently where you're at in life, which it sounds like maybe things are a cakewalk compared to what you had to do before, but what is bringing you the most peace?
I think it's knowing that there was this search for the American dream, right? And it kind of brings me back to that collection room that, when I walk into that Star Wars room, I remember that little 8-year-old kid, that always wanted these things. And it does remind me of what I went through, my entire life to get to that point. That room for me is my American dream. That represents to me that I made it in my mind, right? Because again, that meant so much to me as a kid. Star Wars meant so much. And to think that room, that Star Wars collection is almost the same size of the apartment that I grew up in with 6 family members, to know that I own a house that I could have that, that's huge for me. Right. So,
wow. That's amazing, man.
It's my American dream, man. And that's how it kind of bookshelves, right? Where Star Wars, it's the bookshelves for me, so
with a lot of amazing life and experiences in between, man. Gabe, thank you so much for coming today. You're so incredible. I'm so fortunate to know you on a personal level. And man, I look up to you on so many different ways. I could ask you a million more questions. I know you probably got a bunch of other plates are spinning right now in the background, but I'm gonna let you go, man. But thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely,
you're
man.
incredible.
Yeah, man. Next time, let's come back and talk about inflow.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk about inflow. All right, man.
Thanks,
Bring
Thomas.
it in. Let's go.
Yeah.
Mahalo for listening to today's episode of the Sick Burn Podcast. Gabe's journey is a powerful reminder that resilience, hustle, and a determined heart can build more than just a career. They can build a life filled with purpose, family, and passion. From humble beginnings to a galaxy of creativity, Gabe shows us what's possible when you refuse to give up on your dreams. If today's conversation connected with you, don't forget to subscribe, share, and stay connected as we explore the bright side of life's darkest moments. And for behind-the-scenes content, extra inspiration, and highlights from past episodes, be sure to follow us on social media at SickBurnPod. Until next time, keep showing up and keep finding the bright side. Aloha.